Hey guys, welcome to our YouTube channel or to our podcast. We are Transformative Leadership. I'm Julie Trich. This is my business partner, Emily Adams, and I'll let you go ahead and do a little intro
Intro. Oh, wow.
on the
Um,
spot.
on the spots. Emily Adams, have two amazing boys and years, feels like decades in leadership. Super excited to be here to share all the amazing experiences that I have been with throughout my leadership career. And just my intention is to provide value and um, experiences that may help you grow as a leader. Background, born and raised in the Amish culture. And interesting enough, I don't feel like in that culture I was supposed to be a leader, but somehow I always knew I was leader. And then later when I left and worked in the corporate world and became a leader, and now here we are with transformative leadership. A lot of in-betweens there. In the automotive industry, software industry. I would also say a leader in other areas of my life, fitness, going through a divorce, living life. I think
Leader of
that's
self. Leader of self.
leader of self and also not your average leader because there's not going to be no bullshit. I'm straight to the point. You'll find out as you continue to watch us and listen to us how we both operate, which is beautiful. It's like this yin and yang thing. And I'm super incredibly grateful that we have this balance. Go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. I would say for me, for an intro, I was born and raised in Northeast Indiana. We'll give you like the standard intro, right? The thing that people expect. Um, Grew up not well off. Grew up with a dad who was a farmer, a mom who never graduated from high school. Busted my ass to get through high school, and to do well to get into college. Went to Purdue University, got a degree in organizational leadership and supervision. Went out into the real world, got a job with a couple of corporations that, for those of you who are just listening to the audio version of this, I did was just a huge eye roll right there. Because I feel like the thing they don't prepare you for in school, and I feel like this is probably true of any school to real life ratio experience of like what you learn in school is like the pretty perfect world scenario how things should be if things operated like a well-oiled machine and were an ideal situation. So I remember going into my first supervisor role in the automotive industry and thinking, what the fuck did I just get myself into? PSA, I swear like a sailor. I mean, Emily swears too, but I swear like a sailor. So if that is not your jam or not your bag, no big deal, but we are not the people for you, just so you know. But I just remember thinking, like, what is this? I was 9 hours from home up in Wisconsin. I felt like I needed a passport to be there. It looked right. Like I'm literally just 2 states away from my home state. And I felt like I needed a passport to be there, which is wild in and of itself. It's just wild. Um, and like the directness that I have as a human there in that world, and that they thought that I was super rude. And I'm like, I didn't get it, right? So fast forward, I was there for a year, left that company, went to another company. It was not a US based company like the first one. That's when it really hit me. Like, this is not how shit's supposed to be. This is not how it's supposed to run. This is not how it's supposed to work. Like, what the fuck did I get myself into? A lot of questioning in between that of like, is this really what I'm supposed to do with my life? Is this really where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing? Um, I mean, I feel like we both learned a lot of really great pivotal things in the corporate space and experience. However, quickly realized that for my health and for my nervous system and for what I'm really meant to be doing in this world, it was just a stepping stone. It was just a learning experience. And as you guys watch us and listen to us, you'll know that we talk about all kinds of things. Like we talk about astrology and human design and the human element and growth and development and what all of these things are and what they look like. And having further learned like my human design, whew, that hustle grind culture is not for me. Like I'm literally just not built for it. And I'm like, I don't know how I did it for as long as I did, like almost a decade. And that's rough, man. That's totally rough. Um, so yeah, we're going to do recordings. Like sometimes it'll just be us, other times we'll be interviewing leaders. Like we've got a couple of lineup for interviewing leaders in various spaces, right? Like some of them are in manufacturing, some of them are in the tech space. They'll be all over the place, right? So we want to hear from people what their leadership experience is like and what their journey has been like. So I'm super excited about everything that we're going to bring to you guys. I'm also a talker, so if that's not your
Which is a
jam,
gift. It's a gift. I would also say, like, with this is both of us are very passionate about raising the collective, like the leadership, changing the way leaders lead. And I think both of us had some incredible experiences for us to see, like, what you should do as a leader and what you should not do as a leader. And what's a leader versus a management. So having those types of conversations, and then how do you navigate, if you don't have a team, you can be a leader and, all the things. And even as a parent, I sit and think about like leadership style. And even if you aren't a parent, like if you're not leading yourself, someone is leading you, bottom line. And that's what I'm super excited about, just talking about leadership. I can talk about it all day long for days.
yeah, I think that's so pivotal too, right? And I think just to give everyone an idea of our mission and our vision and like how we got here is we had some really, really, I'll speak for myself. I know that I had some really key mentors. Some of them I didn't realize they were key mentors at the time. Some of them I thought they were the biggest pain in the ass I've ever had. And I didn't realize that they were on my side. They just didn't know what was best for me to operate optimally. And they thought like their version of pushing me to be the best version of myself was supportive, but it wasn't. So I'm sure we'll get into like specific instances and scenarios at some point. But I think these key pivotal moments of like Emily said, like what is what experiences have we had where we had like good leadership interactions and good leadership experiences or mentorships, and then what experiences were not so good? And I think the not so good is really what pushed us into where we're at right now. So what would you say if you had to go into like our mission and our vision for not only our company, but like the raising of the collective and the way we work in corporate spaces?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is a really times and things are changing fast. And the way that we're innovating things, but even if you look at technology, you even look if you look at like the brand new generation that's being born, I look at my boys and I'm like, whoa, they got some incredible, like different insights, different just example, I was talking to Cameron, he's 15, and he said his teacher told him, thank you for being an example of a leader in front of the class. And he was telling me about this, and I looked at him, I said, what is one thing that you feel has made you a strong leader? And he said, oh, that's simple. He's like, I control my mind. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I control my mind, like, and then I can control how I react. I can control my thoughts. Like I know I can control it if I choose to control it. And I was like, wow, at 15, I wish I had that. I was just trying to figure out how I was going to escape my parents because nobody wanted to live that lifestyle. But I think like
The
with
truth
that,
bombs of Cameron.
but as a collective, we can no longer operate out of this very masculine way of leadership, and both sides get to come in, the masculine and the feminine side. And then how do you balance that and still have boundaries and still operate out of love? And how do you see your not I don't even call them employees, but how do you see the humans that report to you or that you lead and guide? and, having those conversations and teaching those skills so you can operate better as a leader. Because we know if you operate better as a leader, it's just a ripple effect. Just if you choose to go drink and do drugs, it's a ripple effect, right? Both of them are ripple effects. It's like, what kind of effect do you want to have? And that's, I think it's huge. And now, so more than ever, like, if we even look at the stats, like, people just aren't going to put up with bullshit in corporations. They're just not going to. And I look at some of the things that are going around, and it's like it's time for a shift. Everything else is shifting, and things are becoming more efficient and more effective, which is also exciting for me as as we think about transformative leadership. Like, that's one of the things that we are really, really good at, is being able to shift things, not just from an operational side, but also being able to shift and help leaders like transform very quickly. And so, as open as you are and as deep and as wide as you want to go, that's where we go. And we've seen, transformations happen within, 60 minutes. So it doesn't take like this
Or
long amount.
less.
Yeah, like, and I say transformations in awarenesses, and like we've seen it in business owners, we've seen it in a lot of different types of people, and it's just not one type of person. It's just not all women. It's not just all men. It's a mix. There's artists, there's business owners, there's realtors, and all these people that we can just quickly transform. But that goes back to, we'll get into this in one episode, but me and Julie have been on this path for a long time. Like, I started in 2019 with a huge awakening. And I think that kind of goes back to, as a leader, we get to decide how quickly we want to grow, and where we're going to be like, we're just going to stay stagnant, or whether we're going to continue to evolve and expand and stay on that path. We all have that decision. It's a long answer, but we got there.
100%. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, but that's huge, right? Like, if we look at the mission and the vision of the company, and in my words, to put that out there, is to shift corporations and to shift the way corporations see their people, the way they see them, the way they hear them, the way they work with them, the way they move with them, and to shift into this culture. And I know a lot of people, um, generationally speaking, a lot of people give the Gen Zs a really hard time, right? They call them lazy. They call them, I don't know, they call them a lot of things, right? But they're just so different. Like, they grew up in a completely different environment. I mean, I remember when the first cell phones came out, right? I remember dial-up internet. I remember having a house phone that had a cord on it. And then once we finally got a cordless phone, the thing dying because someone didn't put it on the charger. And then you had to use the corded phone and stand there for 3 hours talking, right? Like, and this is something this new generation has never experienced. I remember rotary dial phones. Like, my grandparents had one, and you got to the last number and you messed it up, you had to start the whole thing over again, right? So, like, what we see with the newest generation and what's coming in, is they've never had a life without the internet or without technology. And so that's why these advancements and these things are moving so quick. But it's also why the way we operate culturally and societally and corporate culture of the past, like, it just, it's not working, and it has to evolve in order to keep these. And I really truly do believe that if someone is wants to work for a corporation and wants to stay there, I do believe that they'll stay there for longer than, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 2.5 years. I think the going rate right now is like, you're lucky to get 2 years out of someone, um, which is new, right? That's the new normal. And I think that there would be a way for us to get back to this old normal, if you will, of, multiple years, 5, 10, 15 years out of people. But we have to be able to give them what they're looking for, not what we think they need, not what we're looking for, but what do they actually need? I think
We
that's
have
a
to,
huge, go ahead.
yeah, no, we have to be able to lead them what's important for them to be led and not the way that we think, like you said, the way that we think they need to be led. And I think this is where all these tools come into play, the tools that we're very familiar with, like human design, astrology, all these, and there's tons of leadership, great leadership tools out there. But I truly believe it goes back into you as a leader. If you don't know how you operate, how are you going to understand how your team operates? How are you going to know, oh, that's not going to work with her, because you better be direct and to the point and no bullshit. Don't come at me with like, how was your weekend? Nope. Tell me what you need and keep moving. Like, that's how I work. Right. So most leaders will see that as like, she's not approachable. And, in the past, I've gotten that on reviews of like, can you be more approachable? No, I'm good. But it's those things of coming back to the awareness of like, how am I leading myself? And then what tools am I giving my team? And how can I help and develop and grow them? Because I truly also believe, and I know that you feel similar, is if you are a leader and you're not trying to develop your team to replace you, why are you a leader? Because
100%.
you should always be trying to get your team developed to be able to replace you. And that has worked, like in my career, it has worked every single time. And I've had people actually tell me like, wow, I can't believe you're teaching me these things because I could replace you. And it was mind blowing because they didn't have that leader or that mentor to be like, no, I'm going to teach you everything. So when I move or when I'm not here, you can step right in and set them up. And that's what keeps them there. But I think, at the same time, with this newer generation, there's going to be, we get to make some changes of the way we lead. I just even think with my boys, I can't lead them. Well, one, I would never parent them the way I was parented, but I can't lead them with a typical normal society way. It just doesn't work. And I also,
You also can't lead one the same way you lead the other
yeah,
one. Like, let's talk
that's the
about
other,
that for a second, right? Like,
yeah.
that's a beautiful example of what people are going through in corporations right now.
Yeah, they're two different humans, and what works for one is not going to work for the other, and vice versa. And it's the same thing with your team. You can't just have this pure blanket statement and expect for it to work. It's just not going to work. And if you're a good leader, you will also start to see when they start not engaging with you, and that's your cue to step in and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, how can I support you?" And when you say, how can I support you? Like, truly mean it. If not, don't say it. Like, period. We're done talking about that. So that's a whole episode in itself.
I think there's also a big part of it, and I know we know this is not a favorite topic of people's, but vulnerability, right? Like, I remember myself in positions where I had hundreds of people under my umbrella. And I remember, like, the old me was one, and you can attest to this, right? The old me was like, Julie outside of work is Julie outside of work. Julie inside of work is Julie inside of work, and never the two shall meet. You don't get to know where I live. You don't get to know my personal business. You don't get to know if I'm dating someone. You don't get to know nothing, nothing. You don't get to know these things. You don't get to know when my birthday is. Like, you don't get to know these things, right? Right? Maintenance guys, which I don't know if you know the story, but one of our old maintenance guys, like sometime after my birthday, is like, "Hey, you just had a birthday recently, didn't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." Wasn't even in my area. He was maintenance for a different area. It was like, "You just had a birthday, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, well, I noticed that you just have the month and the day on your Facebook. You don't have the year on there." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, so how old are you?" I'm like, "If I wanted you to know, I'd put it on Facebook. Because obviously you've already been checking things out, right?" Like,
That's a
why?
Julie
Why?
response.
That's a Julie response, right? For sure. For sure. But it's like, back then, and I don't know if this was because I was relatively young for the position that I was in. So I don't know if this was some kind of like complex of, I mean, it was a lot of things, right? It was, we keep work and home life separate. But then there's also an element of like, I'm a woman in a man's world. I feel like I have to prove myself. And there's also this element of people have this perception that age matters. you have to be a specific age to have the wisdom and experience and the da 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 whatever to do the thing well, right? Like, well, that's a bullshit. That was bullshit because obviously they put me in that position, clearly knowing how old I was, right? So it's fun and it's interesting, but it's also like the people that I opened up to and the people that I was vulnerable with, I'm still close to those people to this day. The other people, nah, it just no, right? But I think that's also this interesting thing that we've both been able to develop on this journey of self-discovery and self-leadership is like being vulnerable and what it takes to be vulnerable and what that actually means. And that it's not weakness, but if I can like open myself up and I can let you in to see the humanness in me, then there's more grace, right? Like I'll tell you a real quick story. Um, I remember we had this piece of equipment ran horribly a lot of the time, and it was already running like 6 days a week, most of the time 7 days a week. And I remember having a conversation with the second shift supervisor because we were coming up on the 4th of July. And I remember having the conversation of, hey, if I can get your people out, like the goal is for them to not to work, right? The goal is for them to have the holiday off and to be able to spend time with their families and stuff, right? And that was the goal. Like we weren't going to be working. And then I remember like shit went to hell in a handbasket a couple of days, right? And we got behind. And then I remember having the next conversation with him. I literally I had just gotten home and I had sat down in the chair and we had this conversation of like, I am so sorry. Your people are gonna have to work now. And he's like, you fucking promised, he's lost his shit. He's like, you fucking promised me that these people would be off and da 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 da. And I'm like, I am so sorry because I started crying on the phone because I felt horrible. I felt horrible that these people weren't going to be able to have some time off. And now what they thought they were going to get was just snatched away from them. Right. And I felt horrendous. And I started just fucking crying on the phone. And he was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm like, I'm not okay. It's not fucking fair. It's not fair to them that they bust their ass day in and day out and day in and day out. And they had this little glimmer of hope. And now I've got to take it away because the equipment ran like shit. Not their fault. But now they have to work. And he is like, I'm so sorry. And I think that was one of the first times that I'd ever opened up in that way to him. And it wasn't because I meant to, right? Like I was just overworked, overwhelmed, and fucking frustrated. And it just came out. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. I'm like, it's not you, it's the situation, right? Like I totally get it, but it's not you, it's the situation. And so I think having that level of vulnerability where you can be open and you can be honest with your people and let them see that you are human, it's huge. Like, did the me back then embrace that? No. She fell into it a couple times. She didn't embrace it. She fell into it a couple of times. And I'm sure you've got stories like that too.
I would just add to the vulnerability piece is as a leader, when someone is being vulnerable, make sure you hold that space. Because there's been times I was vulnerable because I was going through hell and back in a personal life, and it wasn't held in a safe space. And then before you knew it, the entire factory floor knew your entire business. And then that is the quickest way to lose someone's trust. So as a leader, yes, you get to be vulnerable, but when people come to you, also know how to hold that space to be like, it's okay to be vulnerable here. But yeah, there's been multiple times of vulnerability of I would say like I'm much better at it now than that one's been a practice for me. I still think it's a practice in a lot of ways. It's been a journey. Yeah, all the things.
I think that there are lots of things that are a practice, right? Like you don't just step into leadership. A, you shouldn't step into it lightly. And B, it's an ever changing and ever evolving process. Like you're ever evolving. The world we live in is it's changing all of the time, from the technology to the way people operate to having different groups of people together and trying to intermingle and commingle. So we're constantly having to change. We're constantly having to evolve. Um, and we've always got shit going on. And it's like going back to this personal experience that you were going through, that then everybody knew about it. It's one of those things where I just remember like growing up as a kid and being told, like, yeah, if you're pissed off at Jessica, leave it on the field. It's like, I'm not gonna leave it on the field. Like Jessica's a bitch off the field. Like I'm gonna be all right. Like, sorry, Jessica, if you're listening. Um, but, but
Coming
that's the
on and
thing.
off the field.
But that's the thing, right? Is it's like people expect for you to completely leave everything outside of work. And then when you come into work, for your performance to be the same day in and day out. You're not a robot. And
Yeah.
even those need maintenance, right? Like,
Well, and I think even if you look deeper into different aspects too, and you just thought, just how you work on a day-to-day basis, there's days that, I'm 150%. There's other days you might get 10. And so understanding that as a leader too, because, and I don't care who you are, you don't always operate on 100%. You just don't. You can't. Like you might do it for consecutive couple of weeks or months until you burn yourself out because you need that. Like there's got to be some sort of balance. But I also think when it comes to that thing as far as managing a team, it's understanding like overall how they're managing it and giving them the tools and the supports, because sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, I see something's going on, do you want to have a conversation? And all of a sudden they unload everything that's going on, and then they go out and their performance is a 10 out of 10. They just needed someone to know and to listen and to hold space for whatever they're going through. And as a leader, you're going to have to learn how to hold that space. And it may be some shit that you don't want to hear, or that you were like, I wish I didn't know that. But that's kind of part of your job. So, yeah, performance, man.
yeah,
Yes.
100%.
I feel like
Because you
there's,
never know what someone's going through. You never, and I know people say this all the time, right? And in most cases, it's like, oh, you never know why that person's driving slow and it kicks up your road rage, right? But it's like you never know, like, why someone is completely closed off at work. Are they closed off because they just had a meeting with their boss and they got their ass ripped? Are they closed off because their spouse just told them that they wanted a divorce? Or did they just lose a child? Did they like, you never know. You never know.
and that's interesting because I remember going back into work the day after my ex had told me he no longer loved me. That next day back at work, I was blank faced, straight, don't fucking talk to me. And I remember one of my coworkers being like, normally you would actually crack a smile. Like she was trying to get me smile. And I was like, don't even try to make me fucking smile. And I didn't tell them for the longest time because one, when you go through something like that, it's just like there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt and stuff that you don't even want to navigate in the workplace. And then when I did tell her, she was like, oh my goodness, like, I'm so sorry. But it goes back to this, like, you don't know what they faced the night before or the day of, or even leaving. Sometimes even just dropping your kids off, they're crying, they're throwing a fit, and then you got to go into work. And you're like, shit, now I'm like this horrible parent, right? You have the parent guilt and all this stuff. But I got to set that aside when I walk in the door because I'm expected to perform a certain way instead of actually taking time to process that. So yeah, there's a lot to
I
unpack.
just have this crazy idea. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we had the opportunity in like morning meetings? And I don't know how many people, watching have morning meetings, but if you had your morning meeting and it was kind of like a check-in, like, hey, like, where are you at personally for the day? Can you imagine? Like, can you imagine? Like, I'm thinking about like my production team and I'm thinking about other teams that I led. And like my supervisors and stuff, if I was just like, yo, like, how is everyone's mental health today? Like, where are we at? Right?
I think that's huge. And I also think would be such a freaking culture shift, not just for that, but to also have mental health days. Man, when I gave my boys mental health days from school and they utilize them, I'm like, holy shit. The next day, like, what happened to you? Mental health day. And so, like, implementing that in a corporate setting to just be like, actually, my mental health day is good. My mental health is good. It's just a nice sunny day, and I just don't want to fucking come to work today. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take this day off, and it be okay. Like it be normalized. To be able to have a culture that operates that way, you're going to retain so many more employees than you would if you didn't have that. And going back to the mental health check, like if someone is struggling, then okay, cool. What support do you need? Maybe they need 5 minutes to talk something somewhere outside of the group, or, just give me some grace today. Just don't ask me to smile today. That's a big one is, when people like, oh, can't you just smile? And can you just not shut your mouth and keep moving? Like, but it goes back to that as a leader, like, how do you really want to lead your culture? How do you want to shift and change it and make it more human? Like we're all, spiritual
More
beings,
human.
more
For anyone
human.
who didn't catch that, make it more human, right? But we do this, right? Like we do this. We have days where one of us is like, yo, I'm showing up at 50% today. Like a few months ago, I had this, we were having a meeting and Emily is like, yeah, ready to go. And she's like setting an intention and asking what my intention is. And I'm like, I don't have a fucking intention. Like I am here. I am literally here right now. This is the best that I've got for you. Like it's bare minimum. And that's where we're at. And you got to be okay with that. Period. Period. That's where it was, right? And she was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, all right, that's where okay." And I'm like, "Don't ask." And what did you say? I think you were like, "Well, do you want to not meet today and like meet tomorrow?" I'm like, "I don't know when this shit is gonna end that I'm going through right now." So no, this is the best that we get for the foreseeable future. This is where we're rocking out right now. So your call, but
And that's fair. Like I've had those moments too. There's been, there's multiple moments where I'm like, no, I can't. Like I'm not showing up. And I think sometimes as leaders, like we don't give ourselves enough grace for that piece. And if we don't do that for ourselves, we definitely can't do it for our team.
and make no mistake, like these are not always easy conversations to have. Was it easy for me to say that? In that moment it was because of where I was at, right? It was like at that snapping point, at that breaking point. But there have been so many times that one or both of us have communicated like, hey, this is what I need right now. And then sometimes there's a level of shame and guilt that comes with that. And sometimes, because we're used to this hustle grind culture, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to push through, right? And I know that I've said before, like, I'm just going to push through, or I've said like, or maybe you've said that you were going to push through, and I wanted to be like, that's not a good idea. Don't do that, right? Like, but that's where you're at, not where I'm at. So you do you. But like learning to grow and adapt and evolve through these things as the people who are leading, right? It also can be difficult. Because when literally when you just said, well, I'm going to take the day off today because it's sunny, like my production manager brain kicked in and I was like, the fuck if you are, right? Because that can happen. That can happen. So you also get to give yourself grace for the things that come up in those moments where you're like, I am doing what I need to do for myself to be a good leader, or I am doing what the person that I'm in charge of needs for me to be a good leader for them. And you can still have shit that comes up where you're like, what the fuck is going on? Why are we doing this? And it not be okay, right? Let it not be okay.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, especially in a corporate setting and in a manufacturing setting, like you have numbers and stuff to hit, you've got goals. And I completely understand that. And yes, you get to strive for your goals, but you also get to take in the account of this. If we have this many people call in or we have this many absences, like how can we cover that? And if you don't have a coverage, like create something. Like there's a solution for that. So if someone decides to take off because it's a sunny day, ask me how that came because I've done it before. Like it's a beautiful day, I'm just not fucking going into work. And because it's what I needed. And quite honestly, I got to the point where like I don't care. Like it's still gonna work. It used to be always this running joke of like, we don't save lives, we just build cars. Because at the end of the day, the cars are either gonna get built or they're not. And
Yeah.
it's not like
That
this,
was like one of my favorite lines was, we're not saving
but
lives.
even
We're
if you worked
building
even if
cars.
you worked in a hospital setting though, even if you think where you are literally saving lives, there should be things in place and there should be things put in place so your employees can feel like humans and not like a robot and not like a clock in and a clock out. I'm just a number. If I leave tomorrow, it doesn't matter. That's how you lose employees. That's how you lose them because they're not seen, they're not heard, they're not respected. And when annual bonus time comes, oh, I'm sorry. Wish we could have paid you more. You deserve the bonus, but we're not going to give it to you. Like I just can't. I don't have the funding. You lose them. You lose them.
And it's the funny piece about the money part that I love to bring to people's attention is it's never about the money. If you've ever worked in HR, you know that it's never about the money. It may be presented to you as it's about money. And we used to have a guy who was like great at this. Like every couple of years, he would pretend like he was going to quit. Maybe he really thought he was going to quit until he actually did, right? And then they just give him here's another 5 grand, here's another 10 grand, whatever to get you to stay because you're valuable and we want to keep you, right? And then a couple of years later, it was the same thing, right? So it's never really about the money. Can money be a driver? Absolutely. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not saying that it can't be. It can be a driver. But what's underneath that, right? What's underneath that? Because I can't tell you the number of times that I had people after I'd moved out of production roles being like, yo, could you come back and be our boss again? And I'm like, nope, right? But it's because of the care, because of the dedication, like because of and asking them, how are you doing? I had this one lady who, and you know who she is. She was my team leader, and everybody hated her. And I just remember, and she was gone a lot. She was sick a lot. And I just remember her coming to me sometimes being like, it's kind of like word vomiting onto me about stuff that's going on. And she's like, I'm sorry. And I know you probably don't care my personal business, but it really helps to have someone to tell it. We keep in contact to this day, right? We keep in contact to this day. And she was specifically one of the people that would always come up to me and be like, hey, can you come back? I'm like, I love you, but no, I can't, right? But that's the thing is like, if you are willing to be human with your people, they will go to the ends of the earth for you. They will do things for you that you have never expected. And it was never within the scope of their job, right? Like it just never, it was just not there. But because you were willing to like listen for them to vent, or because you're willing to have a conversation with them about their first grandkid or their husband who is got mouth cancer and needs to have half their jaw removed, but they have to go through the VA. These are all real scenarios, by the way. But they have to go through the VA and the VA is super slow, right? It's like, okay, well, what can we do as a team to support you in this, right? And that's really, and I used to be very, very black and white. Emily, I'm sure remembers this. I was very black and white. I was like, is it no, the policy? I mean, what did you do? Is that outside the policy? There's nothing I can do for you, right? And HR used to tell me all the time, like, you got to find your gray. I'm like, there is no fucking gray. It's black and white. I was part of the problem, right? I was part of the problem. And I needed to see and learn the gray.
There were a few times I played the gray and it actually worked out to my advantage. I saved a few jobs by covering a few absences. And like I got a call 5 minutes before the shift started. Hey, I had a bad night last night and I just got up and I'm not gonna make it to work in time, but I don't have no hours left. Please tell me, like begging me to save their jobs. I was like, don't worry, I got you. Put a vacation day in. No questions asked. And to this day, like the loyalty and the dedication unmatched. Like he just like kept thanking me. Like he's like, you realize had I lost this job, like I would have lost everything. And he was a great worker. He was my best worker. So I was like, absolutely. And I had a lot of other scenarios where I'm like, if I could do it, or they'd walk in and be like, I had one hell of a day. If you can get me out of here as soon as possible, please get me out. And yeah, it's great. I could have probably got fired, but I didn't. So I played the great line sometimes.
Oh, all right. Any closing remarks?
I think the biggest thing is if you guys have topics or questions around leadership, regardless of what it is, put it in the comments. If there's great leaders that you know that right now in this season are leading teams and would be great people to interview, comment below, tag them. Also email us or however you want to get in contact with us. But yeah, that'd be my closing thoughts. And be a leader, lead yourself, because if not, someone else is leading you.
I love it. I love it. I would say my biggest piece of advice, especially it feels like in this season, is ooh, there's two because one other just popped in, and these are not my original words, but only move as quickly as you can stay in alignment is a good one. And grace. Give yourself grace, give other people grace because sometimes we just need to slow down and we just need to move a little bit slower, or we need to learn how to move differently, but we don't know how that is yet. Or maybe we need help, but we don't know what that looks like. I mean, I know there have been plenty of times when you're like, hey, what support do you need? And I was like, yeah, I need support. And you're like, okay, what does that look like? Like, what support do you need? And I'm like, I have no fucking clue. Let me get back to you on that, right? Like, I know I need something, but I don't know exactly what that is. So, like, give yourself grace above all else. Like, give yourself grace. All right. So, until next time, we will be here. I'm Julie. This is Emily, and we are transformative leadership. So, like she said, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, like pop it in the comments. You can email us. It's Julie at transformativeleadershipllc.com, Emily at transformativeleadershipllc.com. And we'll do the best that we can to support you. So until next time, have a great day.